They say a mother's love can move mountains. I never thought I would one day learn that it can also bury you beneath them. My name doesn't matter much anymore. To most people, I'm just Arjun's mother. That title was once my pride, my reason for living, and eventually the cause of my deepest heartbreak. When my husband Rakesh died in an accident, Arjun was only 8. The world went silent that day, the house too big, the nights too long, and my heart too hollow. But I didn't have the luxury to crumble. I had a little boy who still believed that his mother could fix anything. So I fixed what I could. I took over my husband's small logistics business, though I barely understood the first thing about it. The men in the company looked at me with pity, a widow trying to survive in a man's world. I learned every number, every truck route, every negotiation. I made mistakes, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Arjun was my reason for every sacrifice. When I woke before sunrise to check the accounts, it was for him. When I went hungry some nights so he could go to a better school, it was for him. When I smiled through exhaustion so he wouldn't see the fear in my eyes, it was for him. And it worked. He grew up bright, ambitious, charming, confident, the kind of young man who believed he could conquer the world. I saw his father's fire in him, and I felt proud. So when he told me about Maya, the woman he loved, I was genuinely happy. Maya was beautiful, sophisticated, and spoke with a poise that made people listen. She had big dreams and an even bigger family name. When Arjun brought her home for the first time, she hugged me and called me Ma, in that sweet, rehearsed voice. I liked her instantly, or maybe I just wanted to. Their wedding was grand, far beyond what I could afford, but Arjun insisted. "It's not about money, Ma," he said, smiling. "It's about respect. Maya's family is different. They expect certain things." I sold one of my properties to make sure my son didn't feel small in front of anyone. It didn't bother me then. Love makes sacrifice feel noble. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. They would visit every Sunday, hand in hand, full of laughter and stories. Maya would sit with me, asking for recipes, complimenting my saris, pretending to be interested in my old photo albums. But slowly, things began to change in subtle ways, like cracks in glass that you don't see until the whole thing shatters. It started with small comments. "Arjun, don't you think Ma should let go of the business now? It's too stressful for her at her age." Or, "Your mother is so traditional, we need to help her see how modern families work." I would smile and nod, pretending I didn't notice the distance growing between us. I had always believed that love should not demand explanations. But one day, Arjun stopped calling. Weeks passed without a word. When I finally reached him, his voice was hurried, distracted. "Ma, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later?" Later never came. Then came his first request, a call one night, his voice tight with worry. "Ma, I need a little financial help. A deal went sideways and I just need some liquidity. I'll return it as soon as possible." I didn't ask how much. I just transferred the money. Then came another call and another. Each time, his tone carried more urgency, his explanations more complicated. And each time, I sent him whatever he needed. I told myself it was temporary, just a rough patch. He was my son, my blood. If I didn't help him, who would? The numbers grew hundreds of thousands, then millions. I had to mortgage my remaining property, dip into my retirement fund, even sell off part of the company. My accountant looked at me like I had lost my mind, but all I could say was, "It's for my son." Sometimes, when I sent the transfers, I imagined him smiling, relieved, grateful. I imagined Maya beside him, thanking me. But as months passed, gratitude never came. The phone calls became fewer, colder. When I did manage to visit, Maya greeted me politely, but the warmth was gone. There was always some excuse, a meeting, a party, a conference, anything to cut our time short. I tried not to complain. I didn't want to be that mother, the one who clings to her grown child. So I waited, hoping one day he'd realize that the woman who gave him everything still sat alone every night, waiting for a call that never came. And then came the day that changed everything, the day when love, pride, and illusion all came crashing down. But that's a story for another chapter, because before the betrayal there was still love. Before the heartbreak there was still hope. And before the storm there was always silence. There's a strange kind of silence that lives in a mother's heart, the silence that fills the space between worry and denial. I lived in that silence for months. On paper, my son's life looked perfect. Arjun's social media was a collage of success, expensive watches, gleaming cars, vacations in Bali and Italy, fancy dinners with glowing captions like "work hard, play harder." He looked happy. Maya looked radiant. Together, they looked like the couple every magazine would envy. But every time I saw those pictures, something inside me twisted. I didn't recognize the boy behind those sunglasses, the same boy who once tugged my sari and begged me to make his favorite kheer on Sundays. Rumors began to reach me, carried on whispers I didn't want to believe. A supplier I knew mentioned that Arjun's company hadn't paid on time. A friend said she heard Maya's family bailed them out once. Another said the business he claimed to run wasn't even registered in his name. I didn't ask questions. I just waited, because sometimes silence is a mother's last form of protection. Then one afternoon, I got a message from Maya. It was the first time she had texted me in weeks. "Ma, we're hosting an anniversary dinner this Friday. Would love for you to join. It's going to be a small, intimate celebration. Everyone important will be there. Everyone important." The words stung more than they should have. I stood in front of the mirror that evening, adjusting my old silk sari, the one Rakesh had gifted me on our 10th anniversary. I hadn't worn it in years. I smiled at my reflection, a little older, a little lonelier, but still composed. I told myself tonight would be good. Maybe this was their way of reconnecting. When I reached their mansion, yes, mansion, I realized I had underestimated what small, intimate meant in Maya's vocabulary. The house was glittering, overflowing with guests, expensive decor, and photographers. I stood at the edge of the grand entrance, clutching my purse like a schoolgirl lost at a new school. Arjun spotted me after a few minutes. "Ma," he said, walking over, but his tone lacked warmth. He hugged me quickly, almost out of obligation. "You made it," he said, smiling for the cameras I wouldn't miss it. I replied softly, trying to ignore the way he looked past me, scanning the crowd. Maya came next, floating across the room in a gown that probably cost more than my annual expenses. "Ma, you look lovely," she said, her voice dripping with polite distance. "Come, I'll introduce you to some people." She led me from group to group, her parents, her investors, her friends. "This is Arjun's mother," she said each time, her tone careful, measured, as though she was introducing a distant relative, not the woman who had raised her husband from birth. The night went on with laughter, clinking glasses, and words that felt too polished to be real. I smiled when required, nodded when spoken to, and quietly wished for the night to end. Then came the toast. Maya's mother, Mrs. Kapoor, a woman of sharp words and sharper diamonds, tapped her glass and stood. "I want to raise a toast," she began, her voice commanding attention. "To my daughter Maya and my wonderful son-in-law Arjun. Their partnership is an inspiration, proof that success comes when two strong people build each other up. Maya, my darling, you've been the pillar behind Arjun's achievements. You've turned him into the man he is today." Applause followed. I smiled faintly, though every word felt like a blade. When the noise died down, Arjun, already a few glasses deep, took the microphone. He started off jokingly, thanking everyone, saying the usual things until his eyes found me. "Ah, and my mother's here," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "She's always been strong, but you know you'll never be half the woman my mother-in-law is." The laughter that followed was nervous, uncertain, sharp at the edges. For a moment, time froze. I just stood there, the glass in my hand trembling slightly. I could feel every eye in that room turn toward me, waiting for the poor, humiliated mother to break down or leave quietly. But I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just looked at my son, really looked at him. The arrogance in his stance, the hollow pride in his eyes, the distance that had long replaced love. And then, calmly, almost too calmly, I said the words that shattered the illusion he had built so carefully. "Will she cover your $1,000,000 debts then, Arjun, because I'm not sending you any more money?" The laughter stopped. Maya froze mid-breath, her face draining of color. "What debt?" she whispered. "What money? We haven't received a cent from you." Arjun's face changed instantly, the confidence replaced by panic. He stammered something incoherent, tried to laugh it off, but the damage was done. The guests exchanged glances. Maya's mother's smile faltered. The silence in that glittering room was louder than thunder. I set my glass down gently, straightened my sari, and said, "Enjoy your evening." Then I walked out, not in shame, not in anger, but in quiet dignity. Outside, the night air was cool. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt free. As I got into the cab, I glanced once at the mansion behind me, lights flickering, voices rising in confusion. A home built on lies finally cracking open. That was the night I lost my son, and the night I began to find myself again. After that night, I didn't hear from Arjun for days, nor did I expect to. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't painful. For the first time in years, it felt like a weight lifting from my chest. I had spoken the truth. I had faced him without fear. And in that moment, I realized that dignity was far more valuable than any number in a bank account. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. I wanted to know what had happened inside that mansion after I walked out. I didn't need answers from Arjun. I could hear them from the whispers in our social circles. Maya had frozen completely, her smile long gone. She had turned to her mother, seeking guidance, but Mrs. Kapoor was at a loss. The carefully crafted illusion of Arjun as a responsible, successful man had begun to crumble before her eyes. And Arjun, oh, Arjun, he had gone pale the moment my words hit him. The arrogance, the charm, the ease he had used to navigate every room, gone. He sputtered, tried to recover, laughed nervously, stammered excuses. But every sentence made him look smaller, weaker, less certain. I watched it unfold through phone calls from mutual friends, carefully phrased texts, and finally, through the inevitable confrontation he would be forced to have with reality. Because here's the truth. I had given him everything he needed: money, guidance, patience, love, and he had spent it like it was a toy, never once considering the consequences of borrowing so freely. Millions I had sent over years had vanished: luxury cars, lavish dinners, investments that went nowhere. Not a single cent had reached the business he claimed to run. And now, for the first time, it had caught up with him. I didn't feel satisfaction, not exactly. There's a subtle difference between revenge and justice, and I was careful to distinguish them. This was justice. This was life balancing the scales. The days after the dinner were strange. Arjun called once, late at night, voice trembling. "Ma, I can explain, but I didn't answer. Not that night, not the next day. I had learned long ago that the most effective power is restraint. To act too quickly is to diminish your strength." Then came the rumors I had half expected. The business failing, unpaid bills, Maya storming out, friends distancing themselves. The social media posts of expensive vacations stopped. The house that had seemed like a palace began to whisper of cracks. I watched quietly as one might watch a storm approach from a distance, knowing it will pass but cannot control its path. It was during this time that I received the first direct call from Maya. Her voice was tight, careful, hesitant. "Ma, can we meet? I need your advice." I smiled softly to myself. The world had shifted. The person who had called me cold, polite, distant, now sought me out. Not for friendship, not for gratitude, but for clarity. When we met, she looked small, not physically, but emotionally. The spark of certainty, the pride she carried like armor, had dulled. She sat across from me, hands folded, eyes wide, vulnerable in a way I had never seen. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "Arjun, he's in over his head. He's never managed money like this. He lied to me. I don't understand how this could happen." I leaned back, letting her stew in her own realization for a moment. "Money is a poor teacher," I said softly. "It reveals character, it tests loyalty, and it shows who truly understands value. You're witnessing it now." Maya nodded slowly. There was no resentment in her eyes toward me, only a dawning recognition that she had been blind to the truth for far too long. The calm before the storm, I realized, is often the most dangerous time for those who have been careless. Arjun had lived years of ease, pretending to be in control, pretending that my sacrifices were nothing more than a convenience. Now the storm was coming, and I had done nothing to hasten it. It had arrived on its own, guided by the consequences of his own choices. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to be. Anger is loud, but it is temporary. Patience is quiet, but it lasts forever. And patience had served me well, because the storm, the reckoning, had only just begun. In the weeks that followed, I watched as the cracks spread. Arjun's once confident voice faltered in meetings. Vendors refused to trust him. Lawsuits began to surface. Maya stayed by his side at first, trying to navigate the chaos, but slowly, the impossibility of his deception became too heavy for even love to bear. Through it all, I remained distant, an observer, not a participant, and that distance was my shield. My dignity, my quiet, unshakable power. For the first time in years, I felt entirely in control, not because I had money or influence, but because I had truth. And truth, when wielded with patience and calm, is far more devastating than any shout or insult. The stage was set. And soon, the final act would begin. It was months after that night at the anniversary dinner when the final pieces fell into place. Arjun's life, the one he had built on lies, began to crumble in slow, cruel increments. His company, the one he claimed was thriving, was drowning in debt, unpaid invoices, and lawsuits he had never anticipated. His so-called business partners, once dazzled by his charm, abandoned him. Even Maya, who had once worn the mask of patience, left him. She could no longer bear the man he had become, the man who had humiliated me, his mother, in front of everyone, the man who had squandered my years of sacrifice for the illusion of wealth and power. I heard it all from whispers in my social circle first, then from calls I didn't need to answer. "Have you heard about Arjun?" one friend said cautiously. "Apparently the company is bankrupt. The creditors, they're coming after him." I sipped my tea calmly, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at my lips. There was no gloating in it, only quiet satisfaction. And then, one rainy afternoon, I heard a knock at my door. It was Arjun, alone, disheveled, eyes red from sleepless nights and tears he could no longer hide. The confident, arrogant man who had shouted at me months before was gone, replaced by a hollow figure weighed down by consequence. "Ma, please," he said, voice breaking. I don't know where to turn. I made a mistake. Everything's falling apart. I need your help." I studied him for a long moment. The boy who had once clung to me, the man who had called me unworthy, was finally here, stripped of pretense. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to. The silence itself was a lesson. Finally, I spoke slowly, carefully. Arjun, do you understand what your words and actions have cost you? Do you understand what it means to burn bridges and squander trust? He nodded, ashamed, tears streaming down his face. I do, Ma. I'm sorry. I don't deserve. I held up a hand, stopping him. You don't deserve anything, Arjun, but life is a teacher, and sometimes it gives you a second chance, not out of obligation, but out of mercy. I will help you, but not with money, not with shortcuts. You will learn the meaning of humility, of work, of responsibility. Only then can you earn forgiveness. I offered him a small position in my company. Nothing extravagant, no privileges. He would start at the bottom, under a manager who treated him like any other employee, who expected results, who did not bend for a legacy name. He hesitated, shame radiating from him like heat. I don't know if I can. I shook my head. You will. You have no choice now. Everything else is gone. It was bitter and sweet, watching him humbled, watching the arrogance drain from his voice, yet knowing this was exactly what he needed. In the months that followed, Arjun worked. Slowly, painfully, he began to understand the value of labor, the weight of responsibility, and the cost of deceit. He learned the meaning of true respect, not the kind bought with money or charm, but the kind earned through consistency, honesty, and sacrifice. Maya never returned. That chapter of his life was closed, but he began to grow in ways he had never known possible when surrounded by luxury and lies. And though it pained me to see him struggle, I knew this was better than the life he had been living, a life built on false admiration and borrowed wealth. As for me, I rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, I repaired the parts of my life I had poured into my son. I strengthened my company, expanded my investments, and reconnected with friends and family I had neglected. But most importantly, I rediscovered myself. There is a certain sweetness in revenge, not the kind that burns or shouts, but the quiet kind that lets life do the work. The calm, deliberate, patient kind that allows those who have wronged you to face the consequences of their actions. That kind does not make you cruel, it makes you strong, it makes you wise. I never told anyone how much I had given Arjun, the millions, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices. But he knew, and when the world stripped him of its illusions, when he had nothing left but the truth, he understood. And that understanding was worth far more than any confrontation, any heated argument, any tear shed in silence. Because love, when tempered by dignity and patience, can become the most powerful form of revenge, and in that quiet, unwavering strength, I found my victory. I had lost my son, yes, but I had regained myself, and sometimes that is the greatest revenge of all.